Like a puppet in my soul. Right. So next up we have I have decided to follow Jesus. So I'm sure all of you know this song, so you can join. All right, got it. Follow. I have decided to follow you. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. Behind me, the cross before. The world behind me, the cross before me. The world behind me, the cross before me. No turning back. Join me till I will fall. No one joins me till I will fall. One joins me till I will fall. No turning back. Alright, so do we have time for more songs, Sandhu? Sandhu? One more song. Right. So we have Fill It Up and Let It Overflow. I'm sure many of you know this song. Right. So fill it up and let it overflow. Fill it up and let it overflow. Fill it up and let it overflow. Let it overflow with love. Amazing grace, amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Set the high. Once for lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Fill it up, and let it overflow. Fill it up and let it overflow. Fill it up, fill it up and let it overflow. Let it overflow. Right, so Sandhu, over to you.
Hello අය අපි ආඥා කරමු ආදරණීය දෙවියන්ය වහන්සේ ශුති කරනවා මේ ලස්සන දවස ලබා දුන්නාට ඒ වගේම මම කැප කරනවා මේ ආඥා කාලය ඔබ වහන්සේ බාරගෙන ඒ වගේම බාර කරනවා පණිවිඩය ගෙනෙන්නා වූ කයිලිව සහ සීල දෙනාව ස්වාමිනේ ඔබ වහන්සේ අපිට ඒ ඔබ වහන්සේගේ වචනය හොඳින් ඉගෙන ගන්නට ඔබ වහන්සේ අපිට කරුණාව ලබා දෙන්න ස්වාමී. සියලු දේ මිලන්නේ වාසතුමෝ නාමයෙන්. ආමෙන්.
Can you hear me now? Happy
Yes.
midweek, everyone. So sorry, I was talking with my mic muted. Happy midweek. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share with you today. The story is told of a jet plane, right? It was running on 4 engines and it was having a long flight. It was going on a long flight, and the flight got longer when the co-pilot came and said, "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've got some bad news. We have just lost engine number 1. There's going to be a 1 hour delay, and I really apologize for this inconvenience, but don't worry, everything's under control." And then, he signed off. So 1 hour later, the flight actually lost engine number 2. Um, and then the co-pilot again, he talked to the passengers and he said, "Good afternoon. We're so sorry once again. We lost engine number 2, but we still have 2 more engines, so no need to worry. We'll probably just be delayed another hour." And then he signed off. But about 2 hours later, a nervous co-pilot now comes over to the passengers and he says, "I hate to inform you this, but we have just found out that we have now lost engine number 3. But hey, don't worry, this plane was built to fly on just 1 engine anyway, so we will be fine. However, we are projecting a 3-hour delay to our destination. Thank you for your patience and understanding. The cabin is now, somewhat relieved, but they got anxious when one passenger who has never flown before turned to his seatmate and said, 'Man, if we lose that one last engine, we are going to be up here all day.'" So, but I think we can relate to this sense of nervousness that this cabin faced that time during this period of uncertainty. I don't know how many of us started this year with all our plans laid out, 2020 vision boards, New Year's resolutions, dates on our calendars, picked out for our holidays, and but none of us knew that within just a couple of months, everything, all of our plans would go upside down. Just to feel a sense of loss, all we need to do is look at our calendar. So, we remember the events that could have been, the people that we could have seen, and every priority and plan that we made in between. All of these things have now come to a halt, and we are, most of us are, would be feeling what a grief expert named David Kessler called it. He calls this anticipatory grief. It is defined as a feeling that we get when we are not sure about what the future holds, when we are not certain about it. We don't know what tomorrow will bring. For many of us, COVID-19 has broken that sense of comfort and safety, and this grief that we face might actually be a result of that. Now, as a follower of Jesus, how can we navigate this issue? How can we respond? What do we do when our plans and our programs and our purposes are constantly shifting? This uncertainty, this sense of not being certain of what tomorrow is going to bring can be very unnerving, actually, can really mess with our heads. And I'm sure all of us who rely on these plans are going through this anxiety. So what can we do to maneuver through this situation in our own jet planes? which feels like they are running on single engines. Let us now just turn our Bibles to Jeremiah 29. I think most of us are familiar with this chapter. And if all of you, maybe most of you even know what verse I'm going to aim at. Any takers? What verse am I going to talk about? Jeremiah 29. Anyone wants to guess? Well, if you're thinking Jeremiah 29:11, you're absolutely right. That is where we'll be making a pit stop today. I have my Bible opened up to this verse. Actually, you can even recite it by heart for those of you who know it. I'm sure it's a favorite for most of us. Jeremiah 29:11, it says, "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." That's an amazing verse, right? I mean, that might as well be the end of this talk right now, because it's one of those sermons that verses that we often go to find comfort, and that we hold on to. And it's just so profound just by itself. But did you know that this is also one of the verses that is most misunderstood, one of the most misunderstood verses in the Bible? Let us actually take a minute to look at the original context of this verse, right? How did the original hearers understand Jeremiah 29? Given where we are, I think in this situation, we will appreciate this verse even more when we find out its context. Now let's just paint a picture. The year is BC 597. The Babylonian king, King Nebuchadnezzar, plows through Jerusalem and takes a majority of its citizens to Babylon, which is today Iraq. By the time Jeremiah 29 was written, the children of Israel were in captivity for at least a decade now. At this point, God communicates to his children through prophet Jeremiah. Now, I want us to picture ourselves in this situation and put ourselves in their place. They have been taken in exile. They did not have the freedoms that we enjoy today. The close, the closest cultural comparisons were that they were slaves in a foreign land, right? Many of them were stripped away from their children, from their families, and at least, many of us today, we can quarantine with our own families, but they couldn't have that privilege, and they couldn't worship in peace. At least today we have Zoom. So what was God's word to them? Before we get to Jeremiah 29:11, let's backtrack a little bit to verse 4 to 9. Okay? We'll read it. I'll read it for you. God says, "This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. They are prophesying lies to you in my name. I have not sent them, declares the Lord." I mean, did you catch that? The exiled nation of Israel, they have been pleading to God. They've been asking him to save them. They are suffering. They are tired and they are worn out, and they are most of all anxious. They are expecting a good word from their pastor Jeremiah when God tells them, no, I want you to settle down, settle in. As a matter of fact, God tells them to go the extra mile by seeking the peace and prosperity of the very city that they have been sent to exile in. I mean, didn't God know what they were going through? Why did he say these things to his suffering children? These were the questions, that I was also having. Let's read on to verse 10, read on in verse 10 and verse 11. This is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise to bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. That is how that verse comes about. My friends, I don't want us to miss this. God did allow the exile to happen. But what the people of Israel did not realize is that all the while God was at work in behind the scenes, and he knew what he was doing, right? You see, if we turn a few pages back to the history of the Israelites, we'll see that the exile was necessary for the Israelites to unify and purify a nation that had strayed so far away from God. Israel was supposed to be a holy nation, a kingdom of priests, that was to be an example for the whole world. But it had compromised its identity and faith to become like other nations. So God had to take them out of their comfort zones so that they would remember who they really were, what their core identity was. I'm sure that many of us right now and also in the past have felt like the Israelites, right? Have gone through a time where we were going through, maybe you can call it an identity crisis, where you felt alone, where you felt like you were exiled, and where you felt like you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I know I have, and this is not the time to talk about that. But though we may have felt alone, God did show up. He did lead us to people, to resources, to education, to an amazing family, to an amazing community. I'm sure that in our own ways, we experienced how God, intricately weaved the web of our life. All the while, we are reminded that it is only in God that we can find our true calling and true purpose. Maybe that is why God says, for I know the plans I have for you. God knew that these plans, God knew the plans that he had to remind the Israelites who they really were, even though it wasn't obvious to them at that time. God also knew that the Israelites were in the process of reaching the Babylonians as well through King Nebuchadnezzar. And we know what happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. He eventually became a believer of the Yahweh God and even wrote a portion of the book of Daniel. The emphasis in Jeremiah 29:11 is not the plans. It is that God knows these plans. The Hebrew word for plans can also mean or be translated to the word thoughts. So in other words, you can also say that God's plans are very internal to him. We often think that these plans are like a blueprint, that God has laid out for us to walk in. But these plans are not just external plans. They're very internal. They're the very thoughts of God for us. In other words, he's even saying, I know the thoughts that I have for you, for Babylon, for Israel, for the rest of the nations. And I believe that God is telling us the same thing today. I know the thoughts that I have for the world in crisis, for this country, for this person, and for this family. In crisis, I just have 3 points before we close. In crisis, in Jeremiah, according to Jeremiah 29:11, God's plans are purposed for peace. Right? In Hebrew, when we look at the verse chapter 29, verses 11, it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you." In Hebrew, the word prosper, uh, or prosperity, is actually the word shalom. I know a lot of us know this word. The closest English meaning to this word is found in the word peace. Uh, and I feel like what this verse is trying to tell us is that this kind of peace is a feeling of completeness in the middle of a storm. Like the peace among the pieces. When everything around us is going crazy, it is this firm undercurrent that is um, that settles everything else that's going around, the chaos in our heart. Right? It is not like this Zen feeling that we get, but it is a solid subterranean trust in the higher story that we are currently experiencing right now. And the second point is that in crisis, God's plans are packaged with hope. As SDAs, as Seventh-day Adventists, hope is in our very identity, right? We are Adventists looking forward to the advent of Christ, the ultimate hope, right? And I think that this time, more than any other, is a good time to do an inventory on our hopes. What or who are we hoping for? Where does our hope in Jesus rank in that list? It's a good time to dig deeper into our hopes and our identity. And for the third point, we have to read on in verses 12 and 13. Okay, I'll read. It says, "Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. If God's plans are thoughts concerning us, are thoughts concerning you, then maybe the best way to access those plans are to go to God Himself, right? Because God's plans could look like problems when we don't go to God first. Even as we come to Him through a fresh and daily experience, Him in prayer, by encouraging one another, or by checking up on one another, or by inculcating in us a heart of gratitude, we now become sensitized to the movement of God even in the most messed up of situations. So the third point is that God's plans are perceived and understood through our trust in Him, right? So the Gospel of Jesus points out that no eye has seen or ear has heard the things that God has prepared for those who love Him. We can't even imagine the beauty of these plans that God has for us. And when it comes to our purpose and our abilities, we don't even know what we can be capable of when we place our plans into when we sync our plans into God's plans. When we daily submit our plans to God, we align ourselves to God's plan. And we find ourselves as a part of a greater story and find our purpose in the midst of problems. So finally, as I conclude, I just want to tell you this one thing. Pilots, when they face a problem, I'm told that they are told to abide by 4 C's. They are told to keep calm, number 1. Number 2, to climb high. Number 3, to communicate with the control tower. And number 4, to comply with the instructions. When the world is in a panic mode, as Adventists and as followers of Jesus, we have a good reason to keep calm. We do this by climbing higher than our worries, than our problems, than our uncertainties, than our anxieties. When we climb higher to God. How?
What is the meeting?
And we can have access to God, communication with the control tower.
844.
183
So we comply with the instruction.
165.
A safe landing. So I hope that this message
58
you peace during this time of uncertainty, knowing that we can trust God's plan for our lives. Thank you once again. May God bless you and happy May.
Make me a servant, humble and meek. Lord, let me lift up those who are weak, and may the prayer of my heart always be. Make me a servant, make me a servant, make me a servant today. I'm so glad I'm a part of the family of God. I've been washed in the fountain, cleansed by His blood. Join us in Jesus as we travel this town. For I'm part of the family of God. Make me a servant, humble and meek. Lord, let me lift up those who are weak, and may the prayer of my heart always be. Make me a servant, make me a servant, make me a servant today.
Thank you Arosha. අපි ඊළඟ දවස් කිහිපය තුළ තියෙන වැඩසටහන් ගැන පොඩි විස්තරයක් මම බෙදා ගන්නම්. හෙට අපේ තරුණයන්ගේ වැඩසටහන Youth Inspire වැඩසටහන තියෙනවා හවස 7ට. ඒක මෙහෙම යන්නේ ඩොක්ටර් වේරගොඩ. ඩොක්ටර් වේරගොඩ කියන්නේ අපේ ලංකාවේ වෝටර් බෝඩ් එකේ මේ water safety plan ගැන in charge වෙලා ඉන්න එක්කෙනා. අපි හිතනවා ඒක ඉතාමත් හොඳ වැඩසටහනක් වෙයි කියලා. ටොපික් එක taming water for you and your health. අපේ වෙස්පර් ප්‍රෝග්‍රෑම් එක තියෙනවා සිකුරාදා 5 මාර්ට. ඒක ගන්නේ ඇෆ්‍රිකාවලින් ස්පීකර් කෙනෙක්. එයාගේ නම පාස්ටර් Ayanda Abata හවස 5 මාට අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා අපි හිතනවා ඔයගොල්ලෝ ඔක්කොම අපිත් එක්ක එකතු වෙයි කියලා සිකුරාදා සෙනසුරාදා උදේ සර්මන් එක ගන්නේ පාස්ටර් වොම්බෙක් ඩිවයින් සර්විස් එක අපි පටන් ගන්නේ උදේ 9 මාට සන්ඩවුන් වර්ෂිප් එක සෙනසුරාදා මේ ඒක මෙහෙවන්නේ මිස්ටර් සමරකෝන් සන්ඩවුන් වර්ෂිප් එක තියෙන්නේ ඉරිත් සෙනසුරාදා හවස 5 මාට quickly maybe I can tell it in English as well. We have the Youth Inspire session tomorrow at 7 o'clock and it will be conducted by the content presenter called Dr. Veragoda, a very influential and very interesting speaker. I hope you can join us. The links will be shared. Pastor Ayanda Abbata will conduct the Vesper service at 5:30 on Friday. 9:30 Saturday morning, the divine service will be conducted by Pastor Wombek, and I'm very, very sure it will be something very interesting. Also followed by another sundown worship, which we hope will be very interesting, and we know you will love if you attend. Mr. Samarkon will be doing it at 5:30 Saturday. Thank you.